call the session, and it was hectic. We went up and down and back and forth, and it looked like bills were lost, and then they kept reappearing. At the end of 32 days, 5 out of the 6 bills passed, and the 6th one passed by initiative that same year. So we ended up with 100% in just 32 days, and did a whole lot of other things at that same time. So it worked then, and what's happened, interestingly enough, is that we're at the point where we probably need to reinvent a new Washington Environmental Council, because gradually what happened is that the Nature Conservancy and the Sierra Club and the others like to do their own lobbying because they've got their own priorities. And so the umbrella idea, which worked so well for at least a couple of legislative sessions, has sort of diminished, and now it's harder. Because there's nothing like the power of unity when you get, big groups together and they're all focused on one thing. Legislators respond. But we've done pretty well, and at that time, the legislative sponsors of all of those 6 bills, we deliberately went out and got the top people we could on both sides of the political aisle, and there wasn't a big partisan problem. I think the part of the problems today are that, frankly, my own party, the Republicans, too often have been in opposition to a lot of environmental proposals. And then they get in opposition, so then the Democrats say, well, we don't have to pay any attention to them, so we don't have to draft a bipartisan bill. We'll move over here and be more of what we really want. And so the bills get somewhat extreme, and that drives the Republican in the other direction, and suddenly you've got partisanship over something that ought not to be, because they're not talking to one another. Yes?
Yeah, honestly, I agree with you that we shouldn't have a vote on this thing. Really need a representative government's important. And one of the main things in the American Revolution.
Sure.
But thing that, two things you brought up too that are kind of one, I think, cost. Because a lot of these guys don't understand where do we get the money.
Yeah.
And so there's got to be a solution. And like the environmentalism thing in the old 60s. So I think something stopped where we could pay for these things. The things FDR did, or Eisenhower, Kennedy, it stopped the assassination of Kennedy, I think. It's around that time is things like your government-sponsored credit, where the federal government, unlike the states, states got to balance their budget, but not with the federal government. And so you saw in the 60s, I think, people had that, since we're going to have government-sponsored credit, you couldn't really have expansion. So people tried to live in it, so you consume less, so people work with balancing budgets, environmentalism.
Sure.
And a thing that I see going on today, one of the only solutions I see now, with the Ways and Means Committee, headed up by Rangel, New York, and seconded by McDermott here. They're in their folders now for this session. They have a Economic Recovery Act of 2006 written by Lyndon LaRouche, which calls for things such as take your General Motors and Ford and get some credit to these things, retool them, and just go to town. And so this is something that is being discussed in Congress. And I'd like to know, especially on this idea of your federal credit.
Well, the interesting thing is that in 1972, we put up a series of bond issues for people to vote on, and it wasn't that in that case you had to have a vote of the citizens to do the bonding, because you're talking about making an investment and committing people to pay for longer than just that session of the legislature. And once you get beyond that session of the legislature, they have no power to commit. And so you have to go to the people for those kinds of bond issues. We put 6 bond issues on the ballot. We did it during a session when the statewide unemployment in the state of Washington was 13%. It was the Boeing crash, the time that somebody put up the billboard saying, well, the last person leaving Seattle turn out the lights. And the recovery came pretty fast, but we put those bills out there when, people were hurting. They passed all 5 out of the 6. And the one they didn't pass was transit by 1%. And if they had passed that, we would have had, in the city of Seattle, we would have had a fully completed, much broader rapid transit system than we'll ever get now. Mostly because what we did was use the leverage of the money we raised and put it together. These were on building sewers and water supply and community colleges and that sort of thing. And we got not only local support, but we got huge federal support, none of which exists anymore. And the reason, the one biggest problem we've got right now, to do some of the things you're talking about, look where we're spending our money. We've got huge deficits at the federal level. Huge deficits that are a lot bigger than anything you ever read, because they don't count the coming long-term deficits in Medicare and Social Security and some of the other programs like that. And so we don't have the resources now, and what's eating us alive, the cost of health care, and of course, obviously right now, the cost of the war in Iraq.
But all those things have existed in previous times in our history. And so under specific presidents with their type of leadership, all those, like, we needed health care in the 70s. We needed health care when FDR was president. We were in World War II. You know,
Interestingly enough,
and the Civil War by Lincoln was way larger and more expensive than the Iraq War. But Lincoln was still able to fund the Transcontinental Railroad. And so throughout our history, if you look at it, like, we built everything through credit, not through money. And that's based on like what Hamilton did originally as the first Treasury Secretary.
the Transcontinental Railroads, actually what happened is that the federal government, there was a lot of vacant land out here, and so they said to investors, if you build the railroads, we'll give you a 50-mile swath of land on both sides of the railroad, every other section, checkerboarded, as an incentive, which they found was a great incentive. But, when I became governor, there was no Medicare and there was no Medicaid. There was no real spending in the state's general fund of any consequence on health care. Now it is the second largest expenditure in the state on the general fund, just behind education, and give it a few more years and it'll be #1, and it's absolutely shoving every